Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Burchard, and I am the Northeast Regional Manager for Draper. And I'm here with Steve Cook. He is our Consultant Relations Manager, our Screen Surface Development individual, and he also does projection training. And we're here today to talk to you a little bit about large screen solutions that he provides. I'm going to switch over in just a moment to a slide presentation, but feel free to ask questions during this presentation. I think I can see them while I'm doing the presentation, but if not, if I can't, I'll answer any questions right after the presentation. And without further ado, let's see if we can get this fired up. Okay, we're going to set this up. Just one moment, folks. And there we go. And as I said before, this is me and Steve Cook. We're on the phone. Today, we're going to talk about large screen solutions. There actually is a standard for proper image size. And if you're not using it, you probably should. That standard is called DISCUS. DISCUS stands for Display Image Size for 2D Content in Audio-Visual Systems. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into that today, all about DISCUS, but we're going to talk about two viewing categories that you're seeing here that are the most common: basic decision-making and analytical decision-making. One of the questions I get all the time is, well, what is that? Basic decision-making is essentially presentations and mixed use. Analytical decision-making, that's critical viewing, like financial data, architectural drawings, etc. What we found is BDM, basic decision-making, is typically about 90% of the commercial market. This also, what we're talking about too with DISCUS, is we also, like the slide says, this is all based on science too, to figure all this out. Now, we're going to talk about, if you take a look at these contrast ratios, AVIXA, which is the AV and Integrated Experience Association, they created this standard called Pixar.
Hey, Tom, if I can just chime in.
Sure, please.
Before you jump into this standard, going back to the DISCUS standard, so sure. This is AVIXA has a lot of experts in the association, in our industry association, and a lot of really smart people really did a lot of research in this and found there is actual math and science to figure out how big a large display should be for training presentation. And just to give you an idea, if you have a room in an application that's more than 20 feet deep, a 98-inch flat panel, which is pretty much the largest affordable flat panel display on the market, is not big enough for a room that's more than 20 feet deep. So if you got a room deeper than that and you're trying to use flat panels, you're probably not picking a large enough display, which would mean you'd be into a projection system or a video wall.
Yep, and for those people that are on this call, if you want to learn more about these standards, you can go take a look at AVIXA, AVIXA.org. Now, the Pixar that we were just talking about a moment ago, the projected image contrast ratio, it's a standard that outlines a minimum recommended system contrast ratio for 4 different viewing categories. This standard, when it's used in the commercial market, outlines 4 categories based on the content and use of the system. What does that mean? Well, for starters, like passive viewing, which would be a 7:1 contrast ratio. That content is something without any discernible detail, kind of think like moving artwork. Basic decision-making, like we described in the previous slide, that's a 15:1 contrast ratio. That's presentations, mixed use, like we said, but listen very carefully in that It's impossible to get 15:1 contrast ratio in a fully lit room with a white screen. But we've got a solution for that, and we're going to talk about that on the next slide. This next bullet point you see, analytical decision making. 50:1 contrast ratio, that's critical viewing. That's financial data, architectural drawings, things of that nature. And of course, full motion video is kind of what you might expect it to be. That's a high-end film viewing in a dark room. And again, keeping in mind, the commercial market is typically basic decision making. That's one of the areas we want to focus on the most.
So this standard, the PSCA standard, what it is just some targets that we try to achieve when we're designing a projection system. So 90% of what we do day to day, as Tom mentioned, is basic decision making. You know, typically presentations, high def video, a mixture of content. We want to see at least 15:1 to be able to make out the detail in fonts and presentations, to be able to get, you know, a good looking image. So we have a number, we have a way of figuring it out. These are baseline numbers. So we don't want just 15:1. That's a minimum. We want more than that. That's very achievable with the right screen surface. 50:1 is pretty close to almost impossible if you've got a pretty bright room. You'd have to have a lot of controlled light, the perfect conditions, the right screen material, a very bright projector. Full motion video, that is basically film work, real high quality post-production film suite, studio work. You have to have pretty much a totally dark room to even try to get to 80:1. It's very difficult to do. Just to get into those a little bit more.
Okay, let's go to that next slide. As we mentioned before in the previous slide, you can't do basic decision making in a fully lit room with a white screen. Techvision, on the other hand, these are a line of screens. They cost more than a standard matte white screen, but they'll help you achieve the standards that were mentioned in the previous slide. Techvision essentially has got two major attributes. We've got a white screen with gain characteristics, and that's perfect. Like, say, if you have a projector that has low light output, it's just not bright enough, we can actually make it appear brighter. We also have a line of what we call ambient light rejecting screens. It can be used in a lit room. What is ambient light rejection? Any kind of light that's in the room that competes with the projector light, that's ambient light. And we've got 5 different ALR surfaces that we design. What you're seeing this picture of right here is actually a big spray booth, because we spray this material onto the screen material. I don't know if you have any more color you'd want to add to this slide before I go to the next one, Steve.
No, it's just that to get surfaces that have higher performing attributes, as Tom mentioned, you really need a process like this, where we can basically coat elements into the screen surface layer by layer in all different types of components. And ambient light rejecting screens aren't, a lot of people confuse those with gray screens. They're not gray screens. They are a combination of gray, and they have components that we're putting into the layers that make the material what we call more specular reflective, which means we're steering light more than we're diffusing light, which is all white screens do for the most part, is just diffuse light. And white screens, they're just meant to give very wide off-axis viewing. They're not really meant for fully lighted applications. They're great in darker environments.
Okay, and actually that's a good segue into our next slide. If you can't afford a projector that's got enough light output for a large screen, our Techvision white screens are the perfect solution. Gain, what you see there, 1.1 gain, 1.3, 1.6. Gain increases your peak system brightness. We have different gain levels depending on your needs. One important note, however, is most screens lose off-axis performance as the gain increases, but our Techvision screens maintain off-axis performance. what does that mean? Because I can tell you right now, before I started this job, I would have had no idea what that meant. It means that the brightness drops off when it's off axis, leading to a dark picture that's unwatchable. And that's what we don't want. We don't want someone sitting off to the side and they can barely see the picture. Then if you look at the Techvision gray that you're seeing in the center, that's for specialty applications like control rooms, ultra short throw projectors, things like that. On the right is the Techvision ALR, better known as ambient light rejecting. And if you can't control the ambient light in a room, say you've got lights that, they need to be on. If you're in a conference room, for instance, you don't want everyone sitting in pitch black trying to write notes on a notepad. We've got to have the lights up some. This is the perfect solution. These will give you better contrast. And what I mean by better contrast is the blacks are better. And we've got a broad selection of these, 5 of them. And, depending on the application, we've got something for everybody. Steve, did you want to add any color to that before I go to the next slide?
No, and just like the whites, there are downsides as you go up in the percentage of percentage of ALR, which is how much it can reject off-axis ambient light, which is, a lamp off to the side, maybe a little bit of sunlight leaking through the side of a shade to the left. It's off-axis light. It's not light coming directly in from the projector. It's off-axis light that's typically too close to the screen that it's trying to reject. As you go up in that rejection, just like going up in gain on the whites, the off-axis performance does start to suffer a little bit more each time you go up. So that's what Tom's going to show you in the next slide. We do have 5 different ones to pick from, and it's all dependent on the seating arrangement and also where the projector is.
Yeah, because if you take a look at this, what we're showing you, like the viewing angle, like on the top there, the CS 1200X, it's got a pretty narrow viewing angle. It's about 33 degrees. As you go through the various materials, you'll see that the viewing angle gets wider and wider, and it's actually measured out in numbers to the right. How to choose one of these ambient light rejecting screens? Like, for instance, like we said in the previous slide, if the room's fully lit and basically enough light to read a book, or as I mentioned before, take some notes, you got to have some sort of ALR materials. The ones that we sell that are the most popular are in that green box onto the left of your screen. You just select these, trying to decide which one of these you want. Just look by the seating angle, whether it's narrow, moderate, or wide as far as the seat's off axis. Then you just need to make sure the projector throw distance, also called the lens ratio, is supported so there's no hot spotting.
That's more of a number that the designers typically have to worry about. They basically have to look at how far back the projector is from the screen. That distance divided by the image width comes up with this ratio number, and that's just sort of a safety number so that you don't get hot spotting, which we don't want to get too much into that, but you can get a hot spot condition. It's not about how bright the projector is. It's actually about angles. And if the projector starts to get too close, the angles start to get very sharp. And, certain screens that are too reflective can't handle those sharp angles. And a lot of the light bounces away and doesn't make it back to the audience. And what that means is the edges of the image aren't as bright as the center, which causes a hot spot in the middle.
Yeah, so in other words, Steve, it looks literally like a round circle that's brighter in the center of that screen that shouldn't be there. Would that be a fair way to describe it?
Yep. Yeah. And sometimes in certain rear projection projects, especially, it looks as bad as a train, like a train's going to come out from behind the material. That is the worst case scenario, but it can be as little as just the corners are not as bright as the center. That we still consider that starting the hot spot. So it can happen at various stages, depending on how bad it is and how much you watch out for these minimum recommended numbers from the manufacturers.
And if you look at the lower left-hand corner, you'll see there's a screen material XH800X. That UST stands for ultra short throw projector. That's an ALR, like maybe some of you have already seen these projectors from Samsung and from LG that literally sit like right up against the wall. They're ultra short throw. Those are really, really tough to get a good image out of, and that XH800 works really well with those. Or the flip side of the coin is when you go all the way up to the top of that chart, you're seeing the CS1200X. That actually not only has ambient light rejection, but it's got a little bit of gain. So if you've got poor lighting in terms of your projector, that can actually help a little bit. And last, before I go on to the next screen, well, two things. Number one, that 1.7 to 1 ratio you see up at the top of the minimum throw lens, that's pretty much a typical lens. I just wanted to make that clear to you folks out there. Now, the next slide I'm going to show you, because we've been talking about all of this and ambient light rejection and all these things, I'm going to show you exactly what it really looks like. This slide was taken in a church, and churches are one of the worst environments for screens as they are typically well lit. The picture you're seeing on the left is a standard matte white screen. It was a 4x3, and it is almost impossible to even make an image out on that screen. What you're seeing on the right-hand side, however, is our Techvision, our 1200X, which has a little bit of gain to it. It's an ambient light rejecting, so it's rejecting all that light that it's seeing around it. The folks also went with the brighter projector, but you can see, wow, I can make out that image. And that's one of the big advantages of having an ALR screen. If anyone's got further questions on ALR screens, how those things work, just hit me up with questions after the presentation, or you can get my contact information and feel free to give me a call or send me an email.
And oh, by the way, that's none of that is Photoshop. Those are actually iPhone 6 shots from the installing dealer. The church is actually a church that a consultant that I know goes to, and we did not realize it until afterwards, actually until I showed him this slide, and he was like, "Hey, that's my church." So this is real. It goes from unusable on the left to, as Tom said, usable on the right. The other thing to notice, it's not just all about lights and sunlight coming in through windows. If you notice, churches are all white. White walls, white ceilings, white columns, white beams. White is the worst color to use in a projection system because it's the same color as a white screen, which we say is a diffuser. So the church itself is one big white diffuser box. So any kind of light is just going to continue to bounce around like an echo chamber. The light just continues to spatter and bounce from any light source, and it just lights up those white walls and white ceilings and white beams even more.
Yeah, it's a really, really tough environment for folks like me and Steve. Next, I'm going to talk to you about, we have a new line of screens out called our Acumen series. We developed this series based on some requests we had from dealers. Like, one of the things is they're sleeker looking screen cases. Our cases in the past have been kind of utilitarian, and a bunch of dealers had said, can you build something that looks really good in a conference room? And yeah, we can. These are also products that are more feature rich than previous models. They're the only screens that we sell that have a built-in floating wall bracket and a built-in low voltage controller. That may not make a lot of sense to you folks that don't install these, but for the guys that do and gals that do, it's really nice to have those features built in. The other aspect of the case design that we took a good look at is the conduit for the actual power can either exit from the side or exit from the rear. Obviously,
top or rear.
Oh, pardon me, top or rear. And the idea is it's nice rather than being forced to exit out the side like most screens. You just don't want to look at that in a nice conference room. They come in sizes up to 18 feet wide. We've got lots of motor options from rechargeable to PoE, a 7-year warranty. versus a typical 5-year that we have. Any of those cool Techvision screens we just talked about can be incorporated in this design. It's a nice line. This is a little more depth on the line, whether it's tab tension that you see up at the top in a standard size or an extra large size, electric hanging ones, the rechargeable ones, going all the way up to 10 feet wide. And the rechargeable ones are great too. You could charge those up, and they're good for 500 cycles, which means up once, down once. So, I mean, literally over a year's worth of use before you have to charge it up again. So in one of those installations where you can't seem to get the wires easily to the screen, don't worry about it. We got you covered. And we even sell them in manual. Here's another neat solution. This is great for gyms or auditoriums with really high ceilings, because obviously you can't, if you've got a 24-foot ceiling in an auditorium, you can't mount the screen all the way up there. Nobody can see it, or they could see it and they'll, break their necks trying to look at it. What this does is it will lower down that screen to a viewable height, and it'll lower it up to 34 feet. It can lower a screen that weighs up to 1,000 pounds, which is really impressive. There are clutches built into this for safety's sake, almost exactly like the clutch mechanism in the seatbelt in your car. So if we ever had an issue with the motor itself failing, it would stop it, so it's safe. But the only drawback to this is it's not meant for a finished ceiling, which brings me to my next slide. If you need something that's going to fit in recessed into a ceiling, like say, a good example might be a hotel ballroom that's 25, 30 feet up. That's what the rope walker is designed to do. It fits into the ceiling and it will lower the entire projector screen down. As before, 34-foot drop, we can get a maximum image width of 18 inches, which is a pretty darn big screen.
18 feet.
Oh, did I just say 18 inches?
Yeah, that's small.
It's a little tiny one. Sorry, guys. 18 feet. But it's up to 18 feet wide. We can put a variety of screens in there, too, with materials on them. And as we said before, safety features, it's got those clutches on either side to protect folks so that it won't fall out of the ceiling. Speaking of ceilings, we also sell projector lifts. What you're seeing on the left side is our Aero lift. That's meant for low ceilings, like conference rooms, a perfect example. We don't need it to drop way down. We need it to look nice and clean and discreet and disappear when it's not being used, and that's what the Aero lift does. And there's a few different varieties in terms of the weight of the projector and things like that. If you look to the right, that's our scissor lift. That's pretty neat. That goes anywhere from 4 feet down to 28 feet down. It is when you need something that's way up in the ceiling, you got to get that projector in the right location. That is a device to use. Go on to the next. Wow. Go on to the next slide. If you've ever had a projector system that looked washed out, this is the tool for you. It's available on our website. Any of you folks that are on the call that are more than welcome to call me after the presentation and I can walk you through it. What this enables us to do is basically dial in, exactly what you need. As far as what the correct size screen is, we can look at, plug in the numbers as far as the lumen output of the projector, where the person in the back row is sitting, where the person in the front row is sitting, just all these different factors. And it'll tell us what kind of screen and material we're supposed to be using, what kind of projector we're supposed to be using, so you can get something is going to work. Now, this is really more geared toward a designer because it's fairly technical, but we also, for you folks that aren't designers, we have more basic tools that I can actually email to you. All you have to do is just send me an email after the presentation. And to give you an idea what this looks when it spits out a solution, that's kind of it right there. Anything in green you're good. Like I see that a Techvision XH900X ALR that's in green. So I know that that in this particular scenario, whatever values are plugged in, will work. If I see something in yellow, that means that there's one specific area that it doesn't work. Like one I see right in the middle, there's this darker room or a brighter projector. And lastly, the red/orange. And yeah, I know it kind of looks salmonish on your screen, but when it prints out, it'll be red. But that's telling me that's a no-no. You cannot use that combination. It is a very handy tool. And for somebody like myself that's relatively new to the screen business, it's been really, really helpful figuring out what works and what doesn't. Okay, now this is a completely different large screen solution that Draper offers. We have mounting solutions for video panels. We work with a whole bunch of different partners, Barco, Christie, Planar, Epson, all these different folks to basically support, their video panels.
And that's a combination of flat panel product and direct view LED module product, either or.
Yep, exactly. And we offer a few different varieties. When you see that core product, that means it's literally something off the shelf, and we don't need to modify it, just pack it up, ship it to you. Advanced might be something that we customize, mostly off the shelf, but we customize it a little bit. And then you'll see tailored, on the other hand, that's something that we'll design and completely customize for you. And I'm going to show you examples of each. In this next slide, these are LCD panels. I'm thinking these are 55s, if I remember correctly. But what you're seeing here, it looks pretty simple. It looks, you can see horizontal bars, little vertical brackets. It's not as simple as you would think, because the key thing we did with this is we added X, Y, and Z axis adjustments. And these are minute adjustments, like literally 1 millimeter. They're easy adjustments to make. They're very precise to make. And it's a great way to make certain that these panels are going to line up precisely.
And go into possibly, as shown, into a service position if you need to replace one.
Good point, Steve. Yeah, very good point. Here's something that is more what we would call an advanced solution, which we make freestanding structures for LCDs and LEDs. So there's a little bit of customization going on there, but not much. It's mostly off-the-shelf products. And then we're going to come to our foundation mount system. Now these guys are loaded with lots of adjustment, and they go in quickly. It's very fast XYZ axis adjustments. If you take a look at that upper left-hand corner, for instance, that is an adjustment for Z-axis, how far off the wall I want to set up a panel. Lower left-hand corner, I love this piece. It's just a simple, it looks like a simple triangle. What it is, it's an install fixture. What that means is for each panel that's going to go in place, I can just plug this install fixture in and keep going up. So I don't have to sit there and try to measure all this stuff. Just use the fixture to create the exact angles and then just tighten it up. You'll also see the vertical rail adjusters on the upper right-hand corner. Those adjust height. And I'll show you in a minute how that works in with a laser level. In this next slide, if you look in the upper right-hand corner where it says laser level notches, what you do with that is you literally set up, measure out like the center vertical, get it to the exact height that you need it to be at for your video panels. And then now I can just shoot it all the way across with a laser level and line everything up. See, the idea is to be able to take these big video walls that look really complicated and try to make them simple and quick to install to save you guys labor time. And also we build them pretty efficiently and costly and in a cost-effective manner. Right down, if you look in that left-hand corner, the spring-loaded mounting stud, That's our little invention, and it screws into the back of the video panel. And all you have to do when you put these in is just push down over to the left and down, and it locks in place. And here's some fun stuff to show you some finished results. Like there's a tailored example. This is the Hudson Yard Observatory deck, and that's a planar, bunch of planar video panels that are curved. Go to the next slide. This one's kind of neat. This is, or was, I should say, from Infocom in 2019. It's their planar booth, and it's a freestanding video wall, and it looks like that when it's done. Here's another really fun one. Coral Gables down in Florida in the plaza. This is a big one, 13 by 23, like you can see. If there was ever a time to have a structure go together that was easy to put together and was easy to make adjustments for each individual panel, this is a job you want it on. Here's another neat one. This is in the Bell Innovation Center in Washington, D.C. Nice curved one that we did, and that's with epson panels. And then here's a couple other examples that we've done. This is interesting. That's a Sony Crystal LED, for Sony Crystal LEDs panels, but the whole structure moves forward 5 feet. So you can service the actuator, the wheels, stabilizer, but you can get behind the equipment, which is kind of neat. This is neat. This is the SeaWorld display ring. That's LG OLEDs. They're 55-inch panels, but a big old circle. We also work a lot with Barco's Unici product. Our solution is really quick and easy to install. It'll work with a variety of wall surfaces. You don't just have to have, like, say, particle board or plywood behind it. But the built-in square bracing feature, it allows precise location of the Unici wall crosses. So it eliminates the need for Unistrut. This allows a far more precise installation than Unistrut alone. Because if any of you out there have ever used Unistrut, that stuff is almost never perfectly straight. It is heavy and it's a pain in the butt to work with. We also have trim kits to go around your new Barco wall to give it a really nice finished look. I'll show you on the next slide. And they're available in a bunch of colors and laminates. Kind of looks like, if you look at the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that's our structure. And then you'll see the Barco Unici panels on it. And then the very lower right, that's our really nice trim kit that comes with it.
That product there, Barco told us that 80% of their customers like a trim kit because if you look closely at the middle picture, their brackets are shaped kind of like a butterfly and they stick out a little bit. They poke out into view just a little bit, and customers, for the most part, don't like that. So our trim kit covers all that up.
Yeah, I don't blame them. It doesn't look quite finished when it doesn't have a trim kit going around it. And the trim kit goes on really easily too.
And it makes it easier to install their product.
Yeah. Yeah, these things here, you can literally install these things, create the frame on the floor, and then lift it up and put it into place. It's that easy. If it's a really big frame with a lot of panels, you can build them in subsections and then just put them up on the wall. It's great stuff. And that's a map of our contacts around the country. You can see me in the upper right-hand corner. That blue is the area of the country that I manage. You'll see Tara Jacopi. She's my inside sales counterpart. She writes the lion's share of quotes for all you folks out there that are getting quotes from us. Very, very smart woman. And that is the end of this presentation.